right, friends, it is time for us to jump right in. The topic this evening is mental health, raising kids in a social media age. I come to this panel with several hats that I wear. The first is that of a mom. I have two kiddos who are now in college, who are 20 and 18, and my youngest is 15, who's a sophomore at De Anza, living all the great world of what teenagers do in the social media age, and have my own struggles around how much is enough, how much is not enough, what should I be doing? I also am an educator, former teacher and principal, and so excited to be sitting here as a facilitator and a participant in a conversation around how do we better help our young people navigate. And as parents, how do we just stay connected to this ever-changing world that just didn't exist when many of us were young? We have an amazing panel this evening of folks who have different snapshots of expertise. Our asterisk is none of us do social media full-time as our gig of expertise, but I think between us, we have a lot of wisdom and things to share. As I'm going to invite each of you, I'll choose you out one by one to go ahead and introduce yourself, your background, and kind of what brings you into this room today. Christian, good evening. We're going to go ahead and start with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Christian Cabrera. I'm the Dean of Culture and Instruction here at K2 Middle School. Serves like an assistant principal role, focused on the culture building as well as teacher support. My background is actually a nonprofit. I began working in New York. I'm from New York City, and so I began my career back home and been in the Bay Area for about 4 years, but always within education, working mostly like kind of down the line. So started at high schools and GED programs, and now I'm down at middle schools. And so I'm a middle school person. I really love middle schools now, a lot more than high schools and other programs. And so thank you for having me on the panel. I think I hit all the questions. I'm not sure.
Beautiful.
Right.
People who love middle school are special. We love you guys who love middle school. It's a unique calling for sure.
For sure. Thank you.
Jen Rader, we're coming to you.
Hi, my name is Jen Rader, and I've been at El Cerrito High School for about 24 years, first as a classroom teacher, and then I started a health project that is now the James Morehouse project, and we are the Wellness Center at El Cerrito High School, and we work with students and teachers and school staff around a range of issues related both to wellness of individual young people and also around school climate issues. So we help to lead the work on our campus around race and equity, work with teachers to help them understand what it looks like when young people have had hard things happen or trauma, how that shows up in the classroom, and how teachers can be compassionate and skillful in their relationships, and how we all work together to build a welcoming climate. And I also have two boys who 23 and 20, so who went through high school recently.
Wonderful, thank you. And Lashante, it's very good to see you. Lashante Smith, welcome. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Lashante Smith. I am the Director of School Climate in the West Contra Costa Unified School District. And previous to being the Director of School Climate, I was a school psychologist for many years in our schools, and really switched over to focus more on issues related to school climate, just because I have a passion for restorative practices, trauma-informed practices, and really understanding the mental health needs of students and how those needs can look when they are not cared for or not brought up or talked about. And so then we start to see other things. So in this new role, I'm really just committed to trying to design systems that can support our young people while they're in school, while they're out of school, so that they can be successful, and that we really create environments that focus on the whole child and not just look at academics alone. And first and foremost, I am a parent. And so I have a 12-year-old daughter who is currently, like Natalie said, it's kind of funny because I'm battling this kind of social media drama too, of like how much is too much, how much is, not enough, and really trying to balance. And so I feel like everything that I do, I think of her because she's right at that age where social media is almost everything right now. So really coming here today too, as a listener, as I'm going through it, as I'm raising a young child. So glad to be here.
We're all going to learn together and figure this out. For our first question tonight, Christian, I'm going to start with you. And I would love for us just to kind of unpack the pros and cons of social media. I think often we think about it from a pretty negative mindset, right? It's pretty demonized and villainized in the way we talk about it in the bigger world. And so like, what are the positives and the negatives that we think about our youth right now and how much it's a part of their lives?
Yeah, man, to think about it in a way that maybe makes more sense for a student perspective, the benefits are I get to see what my friends are doing, and I get to communicate with folks that I may not see all the time. And I'm able to connect, make new friends based on people that I'm associated with, right? We've seen that a lot here. We had 2 students come in and they were like, man, these kids are so popular. And I was like, how do you know them? Social media. And they had no connection to the students, but they literally just gravitated to them, made friends. And so I do think that that's definitely a perk. However, I do see it as like, it needs to be managed, because again, they went and drive a car, or do other pieces of need, right, that we have in our society. And so I think the responsibility with technology is something that we have to include in the talk that we already have with our kids, around all these other adult type of ways and topics. I really would recommend maybe including the talk in there as well. Like, this is social media, the internet, the whole shebang, because again, for them, this is all they know. This is their world. This is what they know. And we, at least for myself, I didn't grow up with social media, so I knew of the before times.
It's a unique era.
Mm-hmm,
I barely had the internet when I was in high school, so it's
I got
really
it when I was about to go to middle school. So it's crazy.
for Lashante or Jen, other like pros or cons as you think about the opportunity and the risk that we sit when we think about, and we think social media, think about it broadly. So not just Instagram and Facebook, but chatting when you're gaming, like all the ways in which we connect over the internet, which is far more broad than just our narrow slice of Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat, but now it's kind of in all parts of our lives. So other pros or cons that you think of when you think about why it shouldn't be banned altogether, and yet what the risk is.
Yeah, I think there are, like you said in the beginning, I think there are some positives like to social media. One in it just being the connections to the kind of outside world and connection to something, beside myself. And so I find, just especially with young people, that there's so much online that you can get connected to. So I have found working with youth that if I don't have a connection at my home, or if I don't have a connection at school, I can be a part of a larger community on social media. And I can really feel like that is my community. I can build relationships. I've seen students actually have really close bonds with folks that they meet online, appropriate bonds, appropriate friendships. They're learning things from each other. I've also seen youth enter like entrepreneurship from social media, and they gain a following, and they are really showing off their skills. And so again, connection to outside world. Sports, it's big. I can put a highlight tape on there. I can start getting contacted by recruiters and different teams. And so there's all that connection. And I just feel like youth and young people want to be connected to something, so you can find that connection. But of course, with connection comes the negativity as well, where it's too much content, too fast, too soon. And I see the negatives as being, as you're developing, trying to really filter out what I should take in, what I shouldn't take in, and it can become too much. And of course, I guess we'll talk about this later, but what happens online, it doesn't go away, and it can actually keep coming back, and it can really be harmful. So those are some negatives that come to mind.
Beautiful.
Yeah, just building on what Lashante said, specifically the piece, Lashante, that you mentioned around social connection, and especially outside of the folks' own world or experience in school or their own community. Particularly, we see for 2 groups of students. For students who identify as LGBTQ, who maybe are in a close environment that's not supportive, or maybe they're just exploring and they're not certain. Those students are able to reach out online in the ways that Lashante described, and make appropriate and meaningful social connections, sometimes through host organizations that host online groups, and sometimes that they've navigated themselves. And also not just for students who identify as queer, but also for students who might have social anxiety or different challenges around making social connections at school. Some of these students have no problem making close connections with friends who might be across the country through their online activity, including students who I've been in whole conversations with who are referencing a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And then I learn later, oh, they actually haven't ever met this person in person, but it's a relationship that's entirely online. So there are a lot of ways that young people who might otherwise be isolated find connection. And then I think the negatives, Christian and Lashante mentioned them. I know we'll be talking more about that. So I'll leave that.
Beautiful, thank you. I think it's really important for families joining us tonight to really think about there are assets and values to it. And so it kind of leads us to our next question, which is thinking about balance. There are always questions about screen time. It used to be when my kids were little and the pediatrician would ask me, I would always lie and say like, no screen time, no TV. But now they're on their laptops or Chromebooks for school. They need to, a lot of the classes have digital or online components. So they're already having a significant amount of screen time. So we often ask my parents, how much more additional should they be considering? And so do you have thoughts, guidelines, recommendations when you think about that? And how do you think about the complexity of it for the pros you just mentioned? If that is where they're finding connection, safety, and other things, how do we think about the limitations versus the kind of limitless ability to maneuver within it? Lashante, I'm going to start with you. How are you thinking about those recommendations or best practices?
I think it ultimately goes down to the individual child. And I think you have to take that into consideration when thinking about like limits. But I think every young person and even adults should set a limit and have boundaries to when and where and how you're going to access social media. And so for me, when I think about, I can use my daughter as an example. She was on online school all day long. That's all they did, right? It was just remote, it was online, it was all day. So the limit was after the remote, you need to go outside, you need to go do something else. And then as you kind of like earn your time, you can have time on the phone or on the game, but I had to teach her to monitor her own time on it. And then remember, like if you're feeling fatigued and it's too much, just stop. And then if you see your kid constantly on media, needing it, cannot get off of it, then that's when you have to start having those harder conversations and helping them to set their own boundaries. But I was just recently reading an article about even babies now. It used to be no screen time, no anything, but like pediatricians are saying, well, no screen time except for you may want to video chat with a family member, and that's okay. And a kid can see their relatives on the Zoom or on FaceTime, but limit that. And so it's being introduced so young that we just have to be cognizant of like how much is coming in, and again, set those limits based on how your child is responding.
I love the guidance around learning self-regulation a little bit. Jen, come on in.
Yeah, I was going to again pick up on some themes that Lashante mentioned. I work at a high school, and so my context is young people who are maybe 13, 14 years old to 17, 18, 19 years old. And so very often when we're in conversation with parents or guardians, we hear that this is a real point of conflict. And we hear it from young people. They're angry, because a limit was set. I think my perspective would be to, obviously this conversation happens in the context of a larger relationship that we have with our children. And hopefully we can choose a time to engage with this issue when people are calm, when it's not angry, and to make it a conversation more than a confrontation. And to, as an adult, really strengthen our listening skills. And so the initial aspect could be learning about more about how a young person experiences their relationship with their phone or social media, and to find out what's really working for them and what's not working for them, and to include in that conversation our own struggle. I think all of us are paying attention to how much we're on our phone, how it might interfere with our time with family or at home. And so to make it as much as possible, at least with teenagers, a shared conversation, a partnership. Hey, this is something we're all taking on. What do we want to do? And to identify and ask the young person, for them to tell us, what are some areas where you're ambivalent? I get what you love about it. Tell me where it's getting in the way, or where you wish it was a little bit different. And this larger idea of harm reduction, right? Where we take one small step. Well, what might be one thing we could do to move closer to a shared understanding? So if a young person is on their phone till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, what if it was till 10 o'clock at night? Where are there areas where we could check in and compromise and then continue the conversation? And again, that it is a lot for us around listening, because we know ourselves what it feels like to be told what to do. We bristle immediately, and we have a big reaction. So if there was a way that we could make this more of a conversation, more of a shared exploration, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is where it feels hard for me, what are some places where we can come together?
I even get annoyed when my Apple phone gives me my usage report. I'm like, why are you in my business and tell me what I'm up to? So I appreciate that. Christian, anything to add to that?
No, actually, I really agree with both Lashante and Jen. To be honest, there's limits to everything, right? Anything in excess is not good. And I would initiate the relationship. I have twins, they're 4 years old, and they do get phone time, half hour to an hour on the weeknights. On the weekends, they get a little bit more time. This is an experiment that my wife and I are doing because we didn't have this exposure. My wife is a little younger, and she's actually had more time with her phone than I did. And so she has a different attitude towards it. And so we compromise. But again, anything that comes to, especially as the younger that they are, I think you need to establish there are parameters around this thing, right? Like full on usage from an adult, category. It's me. I'm a grown up. I'm on my phone. I'm doing a lot of stuff you don't even know what's happening. I'm not just consuming information. I'm also communicating. I'm planning things. I'm doing really complex actions on my phone that you unfortunately are not ready or even accessing the tool to the fullest extent. You're really just using it to communicate. And so those conversations, and I really appreciate how Jen kind of put it into the neatness of how you said it, because I think that really is the way to do it. We have to listen more, and we have to spend the time with them. And I know that we're also addicted almost to our phones, and so noticing those things to be like, whoa, I need to spend more time. Just explaining how to be more responsible. And those are conversations we have with families at school, and we have conversations with students as well. And we take a strong stance at our school around cell phones, mainly at the middle school, because we want a separation. We want to focus on the person as opposed to the underground communication channel that the kids have to each other, because we wouldn't know what's going on. We have no idea what's happening on their phones while we're in classroom with the same individuals. So conversations and listening are really key.
I want to follow up on a thing you said, Christian, and open up to the three of you around, it wasn't in one of our preset questions, but the idea of what roles should schools play in regulating? It's definitely very different school to school. I've had my kids in a handful of schools across the district, and each school has its own identity around cell phone use. And therefore students have different identities around cell phone use. So Christian, we'll start with you and kind of move through. What do you think is the best practice for a school when they think about allowing students access their phones throughout the course of the day?
Yeah, I think it's definitely school by school. We share a campus with our high school, and they have a different cell phone policy than we have. And so, we're a little bit stricter, and we really tap into the parents, and we're like, hey, this is what, I know you're battling it at home. We don't want that at school. And they're like, okay. And we've tried several different iterations of the plan. Honestly, we're trying to figure out our identity. No one knows the identity. Again, this is new technology, and it's getting stronger and faster and smarter. And so, yeah, I think we've tried taking or asking for phones voluntarily. Confiscating phones becomes a battle. And so this year and last year, even when we were in COVID, we were kind of like, okay, we know that they're on their phones at home, with not much we can do. But now that we're back in person, we're just really struck with the iron's hot, with a new opportunity to come and redefine school. And we're going to ask you to not bring the phone to school, and take a strong stance and say, we don't want the phone in school, but if you have to bring it, because your parents are going to say you need a phone for communications for after school, then they have to be often in your book bag. And that was what we saw normally happening when we were asking for students to voluntarily turn in their phones. They were just keeping them off and in their bags. And so we found a compromise where parents are already communicating to kids, I don't want to hear about the phone, keep it off and in your bag. And then we just use the same language to be able to copy what the expectation is. And we had zero pushback from families when that came up, because families want their kids to have the phone. This has become this, this automatic connection to your child. Some folks track their students, or like where you're going. And parental controls, I think, is also something that some parents really use at different levels. And so I would just say, for every school, try a couple of things, communicate with your family, see what they're saying to their kids around their expectations at school, and then try to copy what your community is doing, because you're just going to keep hitting a rock, or a wall every time when families are coming in, picking at your policy little by little. And so it's been great. The kids get it. Now we're on AirPods. And so that's our new thing that we're figuring out.
The next battle, yes.
Yeah, but so far it's been really well received, and kids are super respectful about it. We're not taking anything. We're not starting our school day with a conflict. Give me this, give me that, do this, and so it's worked.
Beautiful, thank you, Jen. What do you think about it?
I really appreciated hearing from Christian and learning from what you all are doing that's working. I think the most challenging aspect as a school staff person is getting all of our teachers on the same page, without a doubt. And it's fascinating because it's very public who is not on the same page, because the young people share widely, oh, so-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, or Miss, and so that is really, from a standpoint as a school staff person, I would say, honestly, more than working with the young people, it's getting the staff on the same page. I really agree with Christian that that back in the old days when it was like no phones, no, absolutely not. That is just not real anymore. Exactly what Christian said, that parents count on being able to reach their kids, and teachers who take that kind of aggressive approach often hear back, this is my mom. My mom's trying to reach me. And so I know that for some teachers, they incentivize giving, they have a, what do you call it? The thing that hangs on the door. Thank you. That's it. Where the young person comes in a sense, they check their phone in and they get an incentive for that. They get points for that. So it's not a battle. It's not, a punitive thing. They can choose to do that. They can also choose to have their phone, like Christian said, often in their backpack. And then increasingly teachers are asking students, hey, pull out your phone because we're going to do this activity and you need your phone, or you need to access the site. So I think it's evolving all the time. I think that as educators and school staff, we have to be respectful, as you said, about what is the home culture and what's happening in the community around phones, and be ready to be changing all the time. And I think that the big picture for me is always, how can we maximize and strengthen human connection and human relationships? And the places where phones get in the way, those are the places where we want to look. If it's really not interfering with building connection and relationships in the classroom, let's leave it alone. I heard a study, I wish I could quote the exact percentage. I can't remember, but it's some overwhelming percentage. I don't know, more than 80 or 90% of conversations between adolescents and adults are instructive, right?
Mm.
One-way conversations. So what young people are hearing at home and then what they're hearing at school, it's all instructive. And so I'm all about trying to bring more curiosity, more listening, and more learning from the side of adults, and to see what matters to young people, where are places where we can agree, and where do sometimes adults need to set hard limits, and that needs to happen sometimes as well. But this is a very shifting terrain.
It's a dance in some ways.
Mhm.
Lashante, I saw you react to the idea of staff alignment being really essential. Your final thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I think Jen started with what I was going to say. I think it's all about consistency. If you're going to implement any cell phone policy, all the adults on campus need to be consistent in implementing that policy. And where I see cell phone policies fail is when one class is doing one thing, another is doing another thing, and then a student in one class may get a consequence for having a phone, and the other teacher or other staff member is okay with it. So I think consistency, and I also think just involving young people in the conversation and having it be very youth led. Let's talk about it. Cell phones are becoming an issue on campus. What can we do? What are the cell phones for? Why are we using them? When do we need them? When do we not? And collectively coming up with something. And I really liked Christian's, I just learned from you about like your policies and just having the phone off. And I think, again, if adults are creating an environment, and that is the policy, just again, everyone being consistent, everyone implementing it, but then also understanding there may be times that the phone could be useful. So how do we involve that in our curriculum and in our classrooms? And then how do we teach that expectation so that everyone is on board? But I will just end with, I've seen cell phone policies gone bad. Like I've seen, fights over a phone being taken, and I've seen parents up to the school, and I've seen complete mayhem. So I just think whatever's done, it needs to be clearly communicated, clearly implemented, and consistent across.
Beautiful. Lashante, I'm going to stay with you, and in thinking around kind of the arc of child development and like just youth readiness, the questions around kind of when is the right time to allow kids to start. And we're thinking more specifically around like smartphone usage and independent surfing. It's not like I'm handing you a show to watch for a few minutes. We know there's a campaign we were reading about that like wait till 8th, and thinking about 8th grade being the time when maybe smartphones come into play as opposed to like a flip phone or a lockdown phone you only call certain people. Do you have a thought or a recommendation on like when is the right moment where beginning to open up the independent gates makes sense, or is it really child by child and you kind of play it as you go?
I've read the Wait to 8th campaign, and they have a lot of really good points about why you should wait and just everything that is happening online, on social media, and just what a smartphone is actually capable of doing. And sometimes putting a smartphone into a young person's hands is just way too much because they have access to things, that we can't control, right? But I will go back to saying I do think it is based on that child. So as parents, as we know our children best, as caregivers, we know our children best. So we should be able to have that conversation. We should be able to really talk to the person who's going to be having the phone, that young person in front of you, have the conversation, set those boundaries, set those limits. But I do think you can do it too soon. So, wait to 8th. I just think my daughter's not even in 8th grade now, right? And she already has a phone. So I was like, oh, geez, yeah, I'm messing up here, right? But I just really like some of the things that, this campaign is saying. And so I think it's all about how do we set those boundaries and how do we set those limits if we do introduce kind of a smartphone to our kids.
Beautiful, thank you. As a partner to that, Christian, I'm going to come to you first. There are kind of two ways in which kids can engage. They can be consumers or they can be creators themselves. Does it feel like that's different? So do you think that there's a recognition if kids start sooner that it's I'm a consumer before I'm also a generator of content? Is it all kind of the same to you in the wash? How do you think about kind of strategically rolling children and youth into social media or online, the universe that they will face?
Yeah. Yeah, I think when it comes to that designation between consumer and producer, that already is complex, especially when they're coming into it so young. And I think that the allure of the social media is to be a producer, right? Like you want to create content, you want to get it out there, you want to get likes. And we've noticed, I don't know if all of us have, but they've already started doing some things with the like buttons, right? They're starting to do some things with the dislike buttons. I'm a YouTuber. I love YouTube. It's like just consuming and seeing all the stuff I can learn from it. And they've just taken away all of the tally on the dislikes. So you can dislike something, but you're not seeing that it's a million people that dislike it or what have you. Yeah. And so you only see the likes. You see how many people liked it. And so I think there's some tweaks that'll happen throughout as our children, inherit it. But as far as producing content, I think it's been so much easier now to produce content that the phone can be seen as a tool. And you can teach your child, students, how to use it to produce content. But be aware of the content they're producing, and be aware of the motivation behind why they want to produce the content. And so I heard earlier about entrepreneurship. Great. Okay. And what do you need the money for? Like I'm helping you with all the other stuff. So I want to know what you need money for. I think those are real clear like signs like, oh, I have a creative with me. They want to put something together. But I want to protect them, because if they produce something out there that is unpopular, which 90% of what they probably would do is not going to get viral. Yeah. They also need to understand like what happens when you get that hard criticism and that feedback, right? Or maybe we're going to produce a video, but we're going to just not put the comments on, because that way we could just kind of let it be in the internet, right? And so there's ways around it, but it's also increasing the family or the parents or caregivers aptitude on how do you consume versus produce, which I sometimes think some adults aren't really clear on either, right? Like, wait, I could make that? Especially like older, folks and parents who are not really like, I don't care about none of what they're doing. They just ask me for it, and they're good kids. They do what they got to do. But again, it's like, let's help you with this. Let's make sure you understand what they're doing, because again, the smartphone is a computer in your pocket, and my wife, who's a therapist, also often says you wouldn't have your kid in a room with a whole bunch of people you don't know late at night, and so why would you give them the phone without, those limitations placed on them? And so I'm like, man, that's so deep. But I never thought of it that way. But yeah, to your point, I would definitely say it could be used for good or for evil. You got to do great power comes great responsibility, all that jazz. Yep. And I think it's really helpful just to have those conversations. I think, you have conversations about driving, we have conversations about going out, we have conversations about friends, we have conversations about everything else. I think it's very appropriate to say to your child, you want a smartphone? Let's talk about what you need the smartphone for. And I'm not familiar with the wait till 8, but it sounds cool. I'll definitely look into it.
And Jen, thinking about this idea of when they start and then in what space, I welcome both reflections, and I have really appreciated tonight your coaching around how to engage in that conversation in a way that doesn't blow up and then your child hides it or resists it because you've made it a battle. What's your thinking on how can parents just navigate the waters of trying to say, like, to what Christian was saying, I want to see it before you post it. I want to know where you're like, how do we think about navigating it? If you want to be open and give your child the space to figure this out.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take one half step back and invite some accountability, not on the part of the parents, but on the part of all of us who work in schools. I know that we're working with a curriculum now in our advisory called digital citizenship. And I think speaking for myself, and I think some folks here, obviously I did not grow up with a phone. I honestly, what young people know and the way that they use their phones, I can't keep up. I'm not someone who's able to really step in and in a meaningful way advise or counsel them. They know 10 times more than I do. But I think it's what I've seen, I think, is because schools are staffed by adults, is that this feeling that I have as a parent is reflected in the reluctance that I see in schools to take this on with vigor. You know, this should be a required part of curriculum in some course where everyone sits and looks closely at how are we all using phones, and what are the dangers and what are the rich opportunities. And at our wellness center, we see sadly the tremendous harm, right? And maybe I think we're going to talk about this later, you know. And so I think that all of the issues that have been raised so far about producing or consuming, about how we show up in these spaces, I think those are important conversations for parents to have. And as a parent myself, that's not a conversation that I think I would be able to do really well, because my boys know so much more than I do. They would really be explaining things to me. You know, Mama, this is how that works. This is what this can do. Oh, I had no idea.
Yep.
So I think that there needs to be spaces at school where students are sitting with peers and an adult who knows a lot more than I do, to kind of begin to navigate some of this, and understand what the boundaries and the limits are.
Beautiful. Thank you. Lashante, I'm coming to you and thinking around the tension parents hold of wanting to keep our children desperately safe and as well cared as possible, but also honoring their personal space, their privacy. They're supposed to grow and become independent, right? And we all know that evolutionarily, they should have been independent earlier on, and we're holding them tight till 18 or longer. So when you think about this moment, I once had a parent when I was a principal who said she didn't want her kid to watch SpongeBob because, it's ridiculous and had bad language. I'm like, but the entire class watches SpongeBob. And if your kid doesn't know about SpongeBob, like, how will they play on the playground and how will they have friends and be cool? It's like, how are you thinking about both, like, wanting to keep our babies safe for all eternity, but also need them to be social beings that can navigate and exist and have private lives? How do you think about throwing that tension for families, and does one win over the other?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think again, it goes back to one, just having that open relationship with your children around everything related to media use, social media, gaming, internet, everything. Having that conversation. I know for my daughter, on certain apps, I tell her that there's an age limit and or age minimum, right? And we know a lot of kids are just making these apps under the parents' accounts or whatever, so they're still accessing content. But what I do tell her is that this is what can happen when you post. These are the ramifications of it. And because you're underage, I'm responsible for you. So I do require her to give me a password to all of her accounts. And that doesn't mean that I'm checking all of her accounts daily, but she knows at any time I could randomly check her account and see what she's doing. And I always advise parents, there's so much technology that you can put apps on your phone as a parent that will monitor your kids' use. So I know how much time she's using social media. I know what apps she's going on. And I can lock them at any time. So during school time, her apps are locked. She can't access them during school time, right? And then right when a certain period is over, I allow her to access them. And I then again tell her to monitor her own use. We have these conversations. I tell her, man, my screen time was high. Like me as an adult, I need to put the phone down, right? What was your screen time like? So having that open conversation, open dialogue, and, admitting our shortcomings, hey, I'm finding myself scrolling when I should be doing something else. And I'm like, what am I doing right now? Let me focus, And so I'll have that conversation with her. But you definitely don't want to be so limiting, in my opinion, that then they're going to figure it out of how to get it somehow. So you just have to have that conversation, keep it open, and then make adjustments as needed.
Not that we're endorsing a product, but what app do you use to monitor their screen use and time?
It's actually right through the iPhone. It is if you sign up for a family share account through your Apple, as long as your kid is on there, you can lock. It's called screen time. You can lock what apps they have access to. And then there's another one. Hold on, I'm going to give it to you. I'll put it in the
All
chat.
of us are like, please tell me more.
There's another app though that you can actually see everything that they're doing. You sign up and then they sign up on their phone and then you see everything. I'll give you that in a second.
Beautiful. Thank you. Jen or Christian, anything to add on how we think about opening the doors for our kiddos, the wins in the house of personal freedom and independence versus, especially for our bigger guys, versus safety and security and feeling like you can keep their world tight? This is an age-old problem, not just a technology one, but in this format, how do we think about it?
Yeah, I would just underline what you just said, that this conversation is embedded in a family culture and a community culture. So I think families in general that might tend toward being what some might characterize as overprotective or limiting, that would certainly show up here. Other families that tend to be more permissive, that would also show up here. I think the biggest thing, Lashante already said, to, as much as you can, partner with your young person, your child, share your own experience, and together work out solutions. And as Lashante said, yeah, this is going to shift. Be open to it shifting. And I am also curious to learn more about those apps, which would really be helpful. I think they're super helpful because they take it out of the realm of, oh my gosh, are we going to be navigating this every single day? Hey, I said, put your phone down. Hey, what, and if you could just, hit click on something and then whoop, it turns off.
Yep.
And you already had that conversation and you don't have to do it again. That sounds really helpful.
Definitely.
And the app is called Bark,
Thank
BARK.
you. Beautiful. Thank you.
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
Bark, BARK.
Yeah, no, I
Anything
have
else,
nothing to
Christian?
add there. No, it's
Beautiful.
said already. I would just be repeating the same points.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, Jen, I'm coming to you. This is your wheelhouse in thinking around the online world can both lift up beautiful things that are positive and wonderful and also really glorify harm. I know there are sites that glorify cutting. There are sites that glorify eating disorders. How do we think about strategies for parents or educators or peers to engage youth when they're seeing these pieces? Issues around unrealistic beauty expectations.
Mhm.
There's so much visual pressure being put on our kiddos. I know you see, I'm sure, a number of youth that come through the JMP. So I would just love kind of your wisdom and expertise on how you think about this.
Yeah, I think we're all grappling with this. That question is very, very alive. This year, I have heard this word as young people come in, young women, they announce this when they come in and we're, sitting in a private conversation, they share, I have body dysmorphia. And I think, wow, that's fascinating language. Where did you come across that? And of course, everyone who is struggling wants to make meaning or understand what that struggle is. And so particularly for young women, and the ways that you mentioned, specifically around body image and eating, the online environment, that space is devastating for young women. And in some ways, they do, they find sites and they research, they say, hey, this describes my experience. And then they have some language. But more than that, it's the harm that's created, as you mentioned, through the imaging that they see. As far as monitoring or being vigilant around which sites and how, I think that important conversation can happen at home and at school. Hey, where did you learn that? Where did you see that? And then that's a bigger conversation more generally that touches on, big national issues around fake news and, we really want to be working with our students. And this, again, is something we need to be doing at school around equipping them to validate their sources, to examine their sources. Is this someone who I should really be paying attention to, or maybe not so much? And the harm, again, is really everywhere. And so I think I think the greatest harm, from what I can tell anecdotally, talking to young people, is young people. And I have a lot of respect and empathy for parents who carry their own stress. Maybe they're working 2 or 3 jobs, and these young people are spending hours and hours and hours alone in their bedroom scrolling,
Yeah.
and that a great amount of harm happens in that space. And so the kinds of limits that I think I heard Lashante mention earlier around a certain time in the evening when that the phone goes away, I think would be helpful. And in a bigger way, having conversations about sources, what's credible, what isn't, how we discern where we are getting information, and sharing that with adults, and having that be like a regular part of conversation, I think would be valuable.
Thank you. Christian, how are you seeing this show up at the middle school realm, and how are you all guiding conversations with families or young people around these topics?
Yeah. Same almost, not like so much, because one thing that we do at our school, we provide all of our students with Chromebooks. And so families, and these Chromebooks are for the students to use because we have an online program that we essentially use, web-based, for all of our work. And so it's necessary. It's a necessary thing to give the students. And so what we share with all of our families early in the year is that we have a program that's called Go Guardian, and we essentially can monitor all that happens to the students. And so when we start getting explicit notifications, or when we start getting self-harm notifications, those are generally the ones that ring our bell. We check the content. We have those one-on-one conversations with the families and the students, and we try to educate them. Not so much like fake news and things like that at this age, more so, just lack of a better term, just perverse things, like just like really outlandish, dark humor. It's just like, do you really get what dark humor is about? Like, this is not dark humor. This isn't funny in any capacity, right? And then having that conversation. So like they're exploring their identity, they're exploring everything, right? And again, the web, it's out there, it's everything, it's all what you want it to be. And so if you go online and you're looking for something, you're probably going to find what you're looking for. And having that conversation with a family or someone you can trust, whether that be your advisor, your mentor at school, your teacher, your principal, whoever, I think is really helpful for students to know that they have someone that's dialed into what's going on online. However, we do try to do our best as far as notifying families, like, hey, this happened at 1:00 in the morning on a school device. We're letting you know, because it's a school device and this is a breach of our agreement, and then you start hearing more about what's going on at home. Oh, actually, we take the computers at a certain time. That's great. Are the phones included when you're taking things away when it's time to go to bed? Or, unfortunately hearing, they found our hiding spot for the computer. Now they're using it when we're asleep. Oh my goodness. So a lot of things, the students, like the age-old problem, students or kids are going to find ways to do it regardless. Right. So having that open dialogue, like Lashante was mentioning, like you need to be able to have those conversations with your child, or at least know who's having those conversations with them, because we need to tap in and educate them on how to use this new world that it's at their fingertips, so that's as much as I can say on that.
You got to tell them to hide it somewhere different every time, and somewhere usually involved with chores, because kids don't look there, like where the broom lives. Trust me, I'll never find it.
Exactly.
Hopefully my son's not listening. He's like, I knew where it was. Near like the healthy food in the pantry. Never going to find it there.
Never going to find it there.
Lashante, you have this district-wide perspective and thinking around these issues that they work across our campuses. How are you seeing, is there a rise in these challenges? Is it kind of the same and we're all navigating it differently? What's your kind of district capture on how issues around harm, whether it be violence, self-harm and whatnot, are linked to where we are in terms of access to media?
I definitely think that there is a rise. And I also think that we need to hold these social media gurus more accountable, or we have to figure out a way that we can all get on the same page, because it can be very harmful. In particular, I know some of you may have heard there was a TikTok challenge around shoot your school day. National Future School Day. And on that day, we had a lot of threats. Kids going online saying that they would come to the school to cause harm. There was also like the slap a teacher day or hit a teacher on the butt. And although, you know, you would think that kids would be able to see like, hey, let's not do this challenge, let's not participate. Like nationwide, these things were happening. There was the vandalize your bathrooms. And I just think that the social media world and the Facebooks and the Instagrams and the Snapchats, that we all have to get on the same page where when things happen that are so harmful to kids, that it has to be this response that we're taking them down. What we're seeing is an increase in school pages that promote violence. So every school page has like a fight page. They have a bad posture page. They have a kids who wear ugly shoes page. And, you know, we've contacted social media outlets to get them taken down because it's bullying. A kid will see it on there. They feel really horrible about themselves. So again, it goes back to parents knowing what apps your children have access to, setting those limits, and also having access to take them down, see what they're posting, you know, so that you can help intervene. Because sometimes it takes us a while to get pages taken down. So I think just as a community, we have to just continue to try to, one, educate our kids, but two, work with these social media. I can't think of the word right now. What are they called? CEOs, social media, it's escaping me. The heads of the social media,
Yes.
wherever they are. We need to work together to really get some legislation, I think, around safe social media use, especially when it starts impacting communities and students at such a high level.
It's a great segue, and Christian, I'm coming to you to think around this world of TikTok challenges. Our question is really around how do parents, one, stay abreast of them, and then two, what should they do with them once they hear about them? So I will age myself and say that I am a Facebook person, which means I'm a certain age and era. And so I get TikTok things that roll down and make it to Facebook over time, but that could be 2 weeks late because, you know, the world moves fast around here. By the time I'm hearing it, it is likely already a thing. So what is a way in which we think families can just stay more abreast of it? And then what should we be saying to our kids? I mean, part of me always wonders, when that kid left your house with a sledgehammer and a spray paint can and destroyed the bathroom at school, like, where was that conversation happening? And I'm like, did my kid have a sledgehammer in his backpack? Oh no, like I have to check my own son. And so what's coaching you have for parents on how do we stay on top of this thing? Because they're so fast and there's always a new one. It just feels really challenging to stay abreast of things.
Can share some tactics that I've learned that I don't necessarily know the efficiency of it, but it worked for some families. And it's kind of like fighting fire with fire. I've had some families say, I make my own fake account and I follow my kid and I follow the stuff that they like. That way, when they hear something, they notify the school.
Okay.
We've had several families notify us around that TikTok challenge. There was literally like a picture that had a calendar and it said every day of the week, this is what you should be doing. And goes back, this actually touches back on the producer and the consumer of question earlier. The viral challenges are your chance to become popular, right? And so if your page is you don't have to be the person doing the harm, but if you're the person that posts the content, there you go. Yep. And so it goes back to those companies being able to really just hamper down on those algorithms that really promote the sensational and the off brand and all the crazy stuff that goes on, and really start focusing on those beautiful things, like we mentioned, that really bring life and joy to people. Because again, it's all about the AI, it's all about the technology, and it's about advertising. And so if we at least understand, I could agree when we work with families, if we find a baseline and agreement, we generally work really well together. And so I would really recommend checking with your school. They're probably more dialed in. They know what's coming up the pike or heard about something, even if it's a little bit later, they got it sooner than you did.
Yeah.
And it's really on the school to also communicate that to their families. Like, hey, we heard about this. The school is taking these precautions, because just like there might be 10 students really loving that idea, there's probably 50 kids that are scared about coming to school because they're hearing kids rumor around these things, you know? And so I love utilizing email because the kiddos not really in the email thing right now, maybe as they get older, but I tell them all the time, you can communicate with me confidentially there and you can tell me exactly what's going on. And it's like a light bulb goes off in their heads. They're like, oh, I could. I don't have to go to your office. I don't have to talk to you in the yard. I don't have to do any of that. I can just email you what I know. And that's enough. And we use the discretion around how to navigate what we need to find out. But yeah, I would definitely say communicate with school, and definitely if you're up to it, track them. Find them online and see what the kiddos are talking about, because it happens too quickly, and it really depends on what the parents comfortable with, and what they expect. And I'm not saying that schools are this investigative branch, but we do get lumped into so many other areas that it is something that we may have some information on. So maybe not expecting the school to know, but at least notifying the school that you heard about something, and if they have any more information you would like to know, or how are they handling this situation as it comes up. You might be letting us know before we even found out it was a thing. And that right there is what schools have really been about since the beginning of public school, right? To be a part of the community. And so, include us and we'll include you. But I think that's like the probably the easiest way to go about it, because otherwise you're going to be behind the ball.
I love the recommendation of following them. I think with the addition of, I know at one point, one of my children, I will let them be unnamed, had two Instagram accounts. The one that they allowed me to follow them on. And then they had a second one where they're doing their real business. So I had to find that one on the side. And so just know even really good, wonderful children do bad things. So looking for both of their identities, because they have like their with my friend's account and then my mom account. So that's my older lady tip with bigger kids. I'm going to open up to who wants to grab it first. And the big elephant in our room always is, what are signs that your child is being bullied online? But I also want to partner with that. What signs your child is being a bully online? Because every child who was bullied is bullied by somebody, and that is somebody else's child. And so how are we looking for kind of both behaviors as we navigate? And I'm going to add as like a asterisk caveat, what is just normal social interaction? And what is actually bullying? I think at times we lump anything that is disagreement into a bullying category, and that isn't always. So if you're comfortable teasing out any of that as well, I welcome it. But what are signs your child is being bullied or is being a bully? I'm going to open up whoever feels comfortable to dive in.
I guess I can start. I think it's just, again, being very cognizant and looking at how your child is behaving, just looking at any signs that they're kind of changing, looking at anything that they're communicating verbally and non-verbally to you. Are they, secluding themselves more? Do you find that they're becoming more withdrawn? Do you see that they are shying away from social media and that used to be something that they wanted to go on? Are they, just showing any type of behavioral characteristics that can get you to start that conversation and asking like, hey, is something going on? Is everything okay? Searching through accounts, seeing if you yourself as the adult can see that something's going on. I know that I randomly will check different school fake pages accounts to see like who's on it. Is someone being a target? How can I contact school administration and let them know that this kid, is being bullied, or a fight that is just not taken off of social media, and that kid has to continue to see that fight on social media. And then I think when you want to know if your child is being the bully, again, it's all about what content are they posting. Are they very protective over their phone? Is there a change in behavior? Do you listen to their conversations? Do you hear them talking about someone? Are they intimidating someone, using force or control, and continuing to, do harm to someone that's not doing anything else to them? And so that's how I really look at what bullying is. And then again, having that conversation, contacting the appropriate folks. And even if it's your own child, if you find that your child's being a bully, how can you stop that? Right. And then I'm going to end with teaching your child about being like what to do when you see bullying, how you can report bullying, how you can report it to Instagram, Snapchat, social media, YouTube, what should you do as that bystander, and how can you support that young person who's being bullied? So that's all I have.
Thank you. Jen or Christian?
I think Lashante covered it for me.
And I would just add the aggressive behavior, like the protection of the phone. That's a big tell. Like, why can't you just put your phone away? We always put our phone away at this time to do this thing. Why, oh, I just need it. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're getting bullied or are bullying, but it just is a question, it's a trigger, right? Because they're waiting for someone to respond to something. And if the fear of missing out, or FOMO, as they say now, is that important that you have to break our tradition in our home, or in the pattern of going to school, you always turn off your phone. What's going on? Or you used to hang out with so and so. Like everything Lashante said, like all those signs are pretty clear. But definitely like no, you can't take my phone. Or, I would definitely worry about that as well. It may or may not lead to bullying, but again, there's some comfort that they're receiving from it that is, you got to question it, just because real interaction should always be, life is beautiful and it's great to feel and see people. But if you rather just go into your phone and not really interact with us or folks at home and folks around them, I think that's also a cause for harm, because again, that seclusion, they're more susceptible than to like the repetition and the trauma that comes on with online life. And so, yeah, I would just add that, just to say it's not necessarily bullying, but if the student is, or your child is really like, no, and obviously they're not toddlers like mine who can fight me for everything, then yeah, I would definitely cause alarm and really try to slow things down. Have that conversation and say, what's going on? And check in with the school. Is this something you're seeing too, or anyone that this child interacts with? Because it's really helpful when you get a better picture before you go guns blazing.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
You know, I will add one thing, and that is how difficult and complicated these cases can be. So a young person can come in anguished, tearful, and share that they are being bullied, possibly being bullied online, and then in the next breath, don't do anything, because they're terrified of retaliation. They're terrified of being a snitch. They're terrified of being marginalized or isolated by their peers, even when someone is harming them. And so for us, located where we are in a wellness center, we often have conversations with young people. We don't do discipline. We don't get people in trouble. That's downstairs, And so sometimes we collaborate and partner with our administrators and work together with students to try and find a path where a young person might feel safe enough to say, this is who's doing this, because often it might be an account where the identity of someone is masked, and to work with them where they'll feel safe disclosing, who's doing the harm. And then again, also partnering with our admin around, well, who will respond first? Maybe this is the kind of thing where we can check in from the health center, and have a conversation, and it will stop right there. Nobody has to get in trouble. But we're also able to say, hey, if we're having this conversation, and if this behavior persists, you won't be talking to me next time, and so we really try to work together as a community of adults, together with a young person, to chart what's the best path forward in these instances.
Beautiful. All of this segues well into the next question around the complexity of social media and sexual or intimate relationships with young people, both those who are of similar age and consensually dating, but also those who are meeting strangers, stalking implications, sexting. So how do we think about supporting our children as they work to create boundaries and navigate? For our littler guys who are potentially being preyed upon by elders and adults, and the idea that everything is permanent in the internet, which Lashante brought up earlier, I think. How are we coaching young people, and what tips do you have for parents around courage in leaning into the uncomfortable conversation head on? I think for some parents, just like the birds and the bees feels overwhelming to get into, let alone this deep, intimate conversation around sex trafficking and risk. And so when is the right time? How do we navigate it? And how are we supporting young people to think about this part of their identity? Everyone's thinking.
I'm going to say just do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable to have these conversations. I get it. I'm a parent. But you, again, when your child is ready for certain conversations, and if you don't have them and be honest and truthful, they will have them outside of you. And so if you want to be involved in the conversation, I say have them. It is, I mean, again, I'm a parent. I have to have some hard conversations. And sometimes I'm like, oh, am I saying too much right now? But then I have to, when I don't have the conversation, my daughter, I hear her and she's talking about things and I'm like, geez, I haven't even gone over this. I want to give you the right information. And I think that sex trafficking right now is real. There's an uptick in it, and social media is being used to lure young people into sex trafficking, into intimate relationships, into a whole world of things. So it's just important to have conversations about the risk, and then also have conversations about everyone who you think you know on social media may not be who you think they are. So catfishing is real, and I know our young people know what that is. Fake profiles are real. People posing as someone else, all of that is real. And so how do you just introduce that conversation early? Be real, be blunt, say as much as you think your child can take, but then continue to have the conversations, continue to talk about it, and just, I don't want to say normalize it, but make it so that it doesn't feel so awkward. The more you talk about something, the less awkward it becomes.
Yeah, I would also share examples. And you got a plethora of movies and shows and sitcoms and interviews and things that maybe will soften the blow of the conversation, but to be able to introduce it in a way that's, something that they can actually chew on. And so, I don't have any recommendations of shows and stuff right now at the top of my head, but I can say that this is something that you can see the harm of it. And even if it's a Lifetime movie, I grew up on Lifetime movies with my mom, seeing all the stuff like you see. That's why you don't have candy on Halloween, and that's why you don't go down get in cars with strangers, And I'm like, okay, mom, I get all these big life lessons introduced to me. So maybe that's me telling on myself. But I also remember a time on the internet when it was like, you have to have an anonymous handle. You don't put your name on it because the businesses and the companies will find you. And then I don't know, when I got to college, I guess in the early aughts, it was just like, oh yeah, you can put your first and last name. Yeah, you want them to know it's you. You want them to know it's a real account. Oh, okay. So it changes like that. And I was like, I never even got the memo. I just, graduated, and now I could actually have my actual name on my email. And so I do think like that anonymous component, like Lashante keeps saying, just blunt, straight up, go for it. And if it helps, I just saw this great movie. I'm going to show this to so-and-so. We got to sit together and watch this, because I think it really captures what we need to talk about with this, right? But again, it needs to be done together. Hey, go watch this movie. Tell me what you think about it at dinner. No, we're watching it together so we can process this information together. And the piece on trafficking is so real, you may think, oh, that's not going to happen to me. And you never know. And unfortunately, there are a lot of bad actors on the internet, a lot of more sophisticated folks that know how to manipulate the internet to the degree of knowing where you live. So it's very important to just say, this is a big responsibility and we're all in this together. I want you to have this. And so we got to do this together. And I think that's like the best place, because once that communication is open and that bond is there and it's clear, like, my kids see me on my phone. That's why they want a phone. If I'm not on my phone, my 4-year-olds are not even questioning the phone right now, but because they see me, grandma, mom, whoever they're looking up to with the phone, they're like, that's an item that takes a lot of attention. I want it too.
Yep.
And so, looking at ourselves and saying, man, maybe I'm giving them the wrong impression that this is be all end all, and so going to the relationships, nothing beats meeting the person and knowing who you're talking to, and I think it's like, hey, do they have a phone number? Let's call, let's coach you on how to call. Back in my day, we used to call the person home, and
Talk to their
kinda,
parent on the phone. Yeah, those
yeah,
are good
hey,
days.
how do you handle the parent on the phone, right? Because you can't keep cowering around the situation. If you like the person and you want to get to know them, like encourage real interaction as much as possible, because again, you don't know who you're dating. You don't know if that's real. That's not a real relationship. That's an online relationship, but to them, it's everything, and we can't minimize the reality in which they're inheriting,
Wow. Anything else folks want to add?
I would just add one thing. I think Kristen and Lashante covered it well. My point would just be that a lot of the behaviors that they're describing are happening again when young people are locked in their bedroom over hours and hours. And so as much as possible, some families I know say, well, you can use whatever, any screen here in a room where, where folks are coming and going. And that, some people really do, you want to respect people's need for privacy. But I think a lot of the things that we're talking about happen when people have many hours of uninterrupted time online. And that's problematic. So if we can shift some of those behaviors, then some of these kind of consequences of those behaviors, I think will also be mitigated, or they won't be, as bad.
And I think, Christian, your guidance on the question before around shifts in possessiveness over the phone, like turning off notifications that pop up on your home screen, changing those type of behaviors, maybe protecting a relationship that they know is inappropriate, potentially, or borderline. So I appreciate you like calling out, look for pivots. Are they not willing to give it up, but they used to be willing to give it up? Is it always on their hip? Is it always face down? They're not dissimilar to a disloyal spouse. They're very similar attributes in some ways. And so how are we noticing in our children some of those new behaviors that speak? Because if it's someone that's on the up and up, usually you don't mind having those things in public, but very protective, I think they kind of hunker down. A question around just online interaction defining self-worth for children. Small anecdote from my youngest. When he was in 3rd grade, he had a YouTube channel which had like 3 videos of a centipede video. Anyway, some kid was just bullying him because he only had like 6 likes. I didn't really know how to solve the problem, so I emailed everybody I knew and asked them to follow his YouTube page. So we got like 200 YouTube followers, and it solved the problem in the short term, because as a mom, I'm like, I'm gonna win this for my kid. Probably was better coaching to be given in that moment. So because he was like soul crushed, like became so, it just took away all of his worth. How do you think about for our little guys? Because for me, the coaching of it doesn't define you, you're bigger, doesn't actually help. So I'm gonna go to Lashante first. Like, what is the actual things to say when your child is crushed? Because I was telling them to like turn their other cheek, or it's not that big of a deal, doesn't seem to actually help. What's your thinking on how we help kiddos at that moment?
Just listen and validate, and don't try to come up with the kind of like that, right, it's okay, you're going to be all right, just really hear them, validate their feelings, and kind of work together on what the next step should be. Because I think often as parents, as caregivers, we want to just jump in and save our kids. We want to protect them. I mean, I would have done the same thing, like, let me get you some followers, but just understanding that there's some real hurt involved with social media, perception of self, just this whole identity, who am I? And where do I belong? And I think because young people are looking for that sense of belonging, that sense of community, relationships with people, it can be crushing. So again, I would just say, have the conversations, listen, validate, but just don't jump in with an automatic solution. Just listen to understand, and then go from there.
Probably good guidance for most challenges for our young people, huh?
I was just going to say, that's a life lesson right there.
Anything else you guys want to add to that one?
No, I think it goes right back to the conversations, just having those conversations. And I think Jen mentioned it. It's like a lot of these things happen when there's a lot of unfettered usage, right? And so let's just like go from there. But um, where I'm from, clothes was a big identity piece, and so back in my day, and I don't see it as much different. This is just a new outfit. And so it's like, hey, I didn't get all these pages. It's all right. It's all right. You didn't get all that. Let's problem solve. Let's figure this out. What else could you do? What else? What's going on there? Let's do some market research. Give them some language. Because one thing I never had in my life was a coach, of like, if that's your goal, I'm going to help you figure that out. It was always like, hey, you got to ask your friends. And then it's like, oh, sometimes they're not the best sources. And so, yeah, it's about like being on their team. But I agree with Lashante, like they got to fall a little bit. There's definitely going to be some trial and error. My brother had a page where he was reviewing things, and he would get some stuff for free and he would review it, but I never kicked off, and he had a hard time with it. He's like 8 years younger than me, so it was definitely like, oh man, what's going on? But pivot, what else can we do with this site? What else find joy doing? And I think to replace, when you take something away, you remove something, or something is taken away or no longer in front of you, you got to replace it with something. And real life interactions and real life experiences, there's no substitute for that. And so let's go out there, let's figure something out, as opposed to staying in the room, staying in the house and contemplating what to do. Let's go outside and look at what people are doing. Let's just go figure out what our next idea is going to be, because when they see the joy in actual social interactions, I think that's the real insidiousness of this technology, is that I'm from New York City. You would stay in your apartment because it's 20 below outside and you're not trying to go outside. And guess what? Everybody's in their own little corner in their little apartment, and no one could go out and play. You can't be in the hallways because the neighbors are going to complain, And so It's just like you have all these other limitations wherever you are. And to be blessed, for me, this is a blessing to be in California, where you have so much outside space and so many activities for students to do. Really, money is not an issue, when you're saying, let's just go to the park, like, let's just go and look at folks. Let's go for a ride. Let's go drive somewhere, get your bike. The computer's a little too much right now. I see it's getting you mad. Let's go do something. Let's go figure out, how about we make bike videos, There has to be something else that you can replace other than that, because their self-worth is a lot more deeper than, whatever they think at the moment in their 12, 13, or 17 years of life. They can contribute a lot more.
Those little minds growing quickly. I'm going to pivot some questions that are in the chat. We have one from Carla. As a student in the 90s, I participated in programs like DARE and sexual education workshops. Does a school offer something similar for social media usage, cyberbullying, cyber safety? Jen, you mentioned just a little bit of what you guys are doing at El Cerrito. So I want to maybe repeat that piece, and then to Lashante and to Christian, are there broader programs that are in use, or is it really kind of one-offs?
Yeah, I wish I was an expert in that curriculum. I just get it. It comes in my email as a school staff person. But I know that the digital citizenship does explore a wide range of themes, all obviously in relationship to, to young people's relationship to social media, and how to be. I think Christian maybe you had talked about this earlier. What to do about behaviors that young people see that they're not lined up with, and who do they talk to, and who do they tell, and how do you make that safe?
One program we partnered with this year, and we got it from one of our sister schools, which was through Kaiser Permanente. They do Nightmare on Puberty Street, and it does kind of have the gamut, from cyberbullying to friendships, relationships, to body changing, body identity, and they had obviously an online module, because again, virtual has been king for now during the pandemic or endemic, and so they have both options of going physically into school and doing a piece. But what we did this year was they had 4 online sessions, which were like episodes, and then
Okay.
they watched each episode in their mentor group, which is our advisory model. And then from there, the discussions happened from there. And then there was a live session that happened after the 4 modules where the actors who were in those episodes, who are healthcare professionals and entertainers really, but they're essentially equipped and trained to do this. They have those conversations with students, again, via Zoom. Every student, in their own little computer. So that way they have their confidentiality, their privacy, they can chat the people directly. And this is a live conversation where they talk about a lot of these issues. Then they share a report with us if there's anything that we, should be aware of that came up in the chat, and then we would go from there. And the second program that I'm a big fan of is Challenge Day. It's an organization, I think, that works and operates out of Antioch, but they're all over the place. Check out their website. It's literally called challengeday.org. And they'll come on site. We haven't done an online module, but prior to the pandemic, they would come on site and they do this great, just one whole day of just programming with the kids in one space. The big lift there is we need a lot of volunteers because the groups have to be 1 to 4. It's very intimate.
Gotcha.
And so they also cover a lot of those same, what do I do in this situation? And how do I process this in a healthy way? And so I would just offer those 2 offerings along with the digital citizenship. I wrote it down here because I want to check that out. Because I think as we continue to grow in this place of digital relationships and digital, AI being right next to us when it comes down to, just functioning in society, I think you're going to get a lot more programs and offerings like that. Like I didn't know anything about Bark until tonight. So I'm looking forward to downloading that and seeing how I could use it. So yeah.
Beautiful.
Nothing to add. I do like Nightmare on Puberty Street. We've done it in person, and so didn't know about the Zoom option. That's great to look into. And then, like Jen said, in our district, we've been using digital citizenship, and there's tons of great lessons on it. I actually got to go to a school that was using it and watch them in action in their homeroom, and the students seem to be really involved. It's easy enough that the teacher, there's not a lot of like prep work. They can kind of just go through a PowerPoint, and but it's also flexible enough if they want to kind of add their own little piece into it. So I have seen that in our schools, and nothing else to add.
Thank you. Question from Adif. The laws for cyber technology are very vague and ineffective. How can we strengthen or change these laws to protect our children? So are there any advocacy pathways that are bigger than individual one-on-one? Shante, you raise accountability for technology companies and those kind of pieces. Are any of you aware of places parents can plug in that might be part of a broader effort for advocacy?
I'm not aware.
We'll do some homework on this.
Yeah, I'm not aware yet. And I would just continue to add the pressure, calling your local congressperson, making sure you're around groups like this, joining, informing yourself, educating yourself, and then getting your word out. But yeah, I have no idea, but I'm sure that there are several advocacy groups. And if you do a little more digging, I'm confident we can find them. But at the present time, I'm sorry, Edith, you no say.
Yeah, I would just add to what Christian's saying. Email these social media groups, email your local Congress, we're in the same area, our local lawmakers, because again, I think that there needs to be some community-wide organizing around social media, and again, it's positive. There's some positivity, but then there's also some negative impacts. So I would do some more searching to see who we could, contact to start to organize more around that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I also don't know the answer to that.
We can do a little homework on what's coming down the pipeline on this one. I'm sure there are places like, I know Common Sense, me and others have an advocacy arm, which we could potentially link folks with. So.
Can I add one thing though? And
Mhm.
this is probably the most powerful thing, voting with the non-download. So we just all get off these social media platforms, which I know is crazy. But again, it's like, no, like that's not for me. It's a bigger lift, but that's what they respond to. They respond to the clicks, they respond to who's downloading, they respond to posting content, they respond to usage and engagement with their platform. And so again, this is a larger topic, but if you want the company to change, you got to hit them where it hurts. If you want the law to change, we have to kind of annoy, pressure, in order to get it, before some catastrophe happens that obviously could have been avoided. Because generally that's how things change, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yep. Lashante, I'm going to throw this one to you from Carla. Is there a current policy in our district regarding students connecting with faculty, teachers, and staff online that you know of?
Connecting as far
Like if a teacher takes kids on as Instagram followers or Facebook friends, or a staff person for children who are still enrolled in the schools and active as students?
It's funny that was asked, because we are currently looking at our social media policies now. There is an employee code of conduct that was written to include social media before social media became so large and so readily available. But in general, there should not be so let me just phrase in two ways. There's some teachers who have teacher accounts that students follow to get information. It's all educationally relevant, and it is a way for students to stay connected to their classroom. But there shouldn't be any outside accounts of teachers or any school staff and students going on. And there shouldn't be any like kind of inappropriate interaction on just personal accounts to students. So I hope that answers.
Christian, do you have any regulations at Summit about those interactions?
I think we just go with the rule of thumb of no, just no. And I think we generally speak to the need of the faculty to have privacy, and so it's like you wouldn't want your students seeing what you're doing on your social media page, and so please don't share. Oh, but what if I have another page? You're really gonna manage two separate pages, and like think about it. Like, so walking through the pieces of it is like, there's a line, and unfortunately online it's changing every day. So best policy is professionally, we share with our staff, we don't do that. Luckily, we're so young at my school, like the students are so young that a lot of the teachers, going back to the point on the cell phone policy, it's like we're all on the same page. We all get, we all know where we are. But yeah, I think it gets a little bit more. I've been in high school, I've been in GD programs, that's when it gets a little bit more like, but why not? And I think those are also really critical times when staff should not have those interactions with students. But again, I think it's definitely those district to district, school to school. But at least where I'm at, where we sit here at K2 and at Summit at large, it's just like, keep it separate, and so I do agree. Like, I know that there's some practices in the field of like, if you have a teacher page and whatnot, I think over the pandemic, a lot of those proliferated because teachers wanted to connect to the students, with their content. But yeah, on the rule of thumb, generally not. Just keep it separate. They have their social media presence. You have your own social media presence. And when you're at school, we share this time together live and on the school page. Feel free to post it on the school page. That way we know and we can see it.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to Lashante and the other folks at the district who are revising that policy. I think that a lot of us intuitively know what's right and what's not and what feels uncomfortable, but not everybody does. And a clear policy would be super helpful. It would help everyone do the right thing. And so, yeah, I really am grateful for that. I'll keep an eye out for that. I know we have had staff who have been disciplined exactly around this issue, and the specific staff members have been, What's the problem? Yeah, so clear guidance from the district would be really welcome.
I will say, putting on my formal principal hat, that I definitely demanded of my staff not to do those connections for their own protection, not even for that of children, especially in high school where the ages can get very close between staff and young people, really trying to make sure that there are no confused lines. And that is impossible when you're not friends to have confused lines. It is very possible. So for anyone who's an educator listening right now, if you have power over that policy, I would strongly assert it. Likewise, I would encourage our young teachers to have their accounts locked down and not public. Also problematic for lots of reasons. You know, if kids aren't following them directly, but they have public accounts, it's a very similar problem. So random aside, putting my other hat back on. From Carla, while I understood phone usage is limited in schools, is there a policy for students recording their teachers on campus?
So I'll jump in on that one. Yeah, we dealt with that earlier this year. And again, with our phone policy being so clear of like no phone at school, you know, it gave us that credibility or that platform to really say, this is why we rather not have it in school. And it starts with a teacher, and then it becomes a student, and then it goes to a fake page, and then it becomes the whole thing, you know? And so, yeah, you know, I think that's kind of where it's been. It's like not in the classroom. If you need to use your phone for any purpose, please come to the office. You can use your phone there if you don't want to use a school phone. But again, it's just the recording of the faculty, recording of others. We've had to educate our students on like, this is without their permission, you do not have consent to do that, you know, and they need to give you consent to record their image and their likeness. The same way we ask for that, you know, from your parents, you know, the permission to do so, you need to follow those rules as well. Whether that's fixed, you know, in a court of law and everything, I'm not sure, but that's essentially like the path we've taken when it comes to usage at school, because again, it could turn into, oh, I'm recording you doing a prank on someone, and now that prank is online, and now families of that student who was just pranked have to deal with that online. And so that's why the age, the appropriateness, the responsibility, the talk, if you will, like I started this evening, is really important to have at home around what's your expectation at school. And when you register your student at a new school, find out what's your cell phone policy and how can we work together to manage my child's cell phone usage? Because again, you know, whatever the family needs are, you know, share that with your administration, because I'm sure that they would definitely appreciate knowing where you stand, because that also informs our own policies and practices.
And there's a follow-up question around the digital citizenship curriculum in the district. Is that at all school sites, or is it optional at school sites?
It's optional, but all school sites have access to it.
Gotcha. All right. Give one more minute for folks to ask any last minute questions. Oh, is there a pathway for public feedback on the revision of the current social media policy?
Yes. So we met about this right before going into Christmas break and the holiday break. And then once we were off of that break, we came back to a mass shortage in schools, to where everyone has been at the school sites, but we are getting back to work. And so there will be public opportunity to sit at the table as we craft a new policy.
Beautiful.
I shouldn't say new, revise the policy.
Really updated. The world has changed very quickly.
Exactly.
So even somewhat modern policies are going to be outdated every year or two anyway.
Right.
So. Where should folks keep an eye on to be able to follow the progress of that work? Is it in a certain committee?
Yeah, so several ways. So we have just our whole positive school climate initiative that is still going, and we are updating our website. And so the website will contain updates, but if you want, I can put my email in the the chat, and you can feel free to email me. And then I have been connecting with some community-based organizations already. And so I'll put an email out to them, and hopefully that email will then go out to all of their networks so that we can get input.
Beautiful. And if you send us information, we can put it out on the Ed Fair webpage and on
Yes.
social media channels of the Ed Fair as well.
Yes.
Beautiful. As we are wrapping up this evening, my last question for you guys is, if you could give one bit of advice, so parents can't fight every battle with their children. If you could do one thing a parent after tonight should try and implement or start doing with their kiddo, what is the one thing you'd want them to take away from this evening as a new thing to try or a new process to take with their young person as they navigate this world?
I guess mine would be very simple. Coming back to what I think has come up over and over again is start the conversation, and underlining again what I had mentioned earlier, remind yourself to do more listening than talking. You know, find out specifically, hey, what really works for you? What do you really enjoy about your relationship with social media? And what are the places where it feels kind of hard, or where you're wondering, you know, how you want to navigate that, and then yeah, go from there. And I would also encourage parents to, which is what we do all the time, right, is talk to other parents and find out, hey, what have you done that's successful? You know, Lashante shared apps with us. So what are other people doing that's effective and helpful?
Love it. Thank you.
I would just add, approach it, lead it. And so start the conversation. Don't let it come to you. Don't let it just happen. Just take the initiative and lead the conversation, own it. I would also recommend do that with empathy, right? We ourselves are creatures of this item as well. And so, you know, banning it or controlling and you're going to get a lot of bristling, a lot of resistance, a lot of fighting. And then it pulls away from your own vigor of trying to do this for the right cause and the right reason. And so if you approach it with the reflection, with humility, with empathy of like, hey, I just got out this webinar, you know, and I really want to talk to you around this thing, you know, how you feel about it. I don't want to talk to you about my phone usage. But again, I am providing this for you, right? And I am trying to make sure that you can be responsible in the world you're a part of. So I think I have enough, you know, cred with you to say, let's have this conversation. And as long as you do it with that level of empathy, not to say you know, relinquishing, you know, all of it, but to say like, I can understand it. I see what I'm doing. You know, let's check our screen time on Sundays together. Let's try to make a goal together. Because again, human interaction, that's all this technology is doing. It's taking us away from each other, and we need to connect. This pandemic taught that lesson to me mostly. And so I really would love to, you know, connect to schools, connect to parents, connect to each other, because that's the way we can all continue to build on our communities, make them strong and resilient, because the technology can split us apart.
I love that. Thank you. Lashante, our final word.
I think Jen and Christian said it perfectly. I would ditto that, and then just say, have patience with yourself, and have patience with your child. And like Natalie mentioned earlier, things are changing so fast that what was yesterday may not be anymore tomorrow. Things are evolving. And so we have to have patience. And not everything has to be a battle, right? And so listen more, listen to understand, and really try to get to that compromise, and just understand that things are moving so fast, you know, for all of us, that we just have to be gentle and empathetic, and know that we will get through this. You know, we will get through this, and just have that conversation and have it early and just do it.
I feel like you guys just gave me the parenting seminar I needed for all topics in raising children right now, not just this one, whether it be chores, homework, school in general, all kinds of stuff. So may we all walk with a little bit of more patience, grace, and gratitude with our kiddos, and give them room to talk more than we do, I think we'll all be a little happier at the end of the day. I want to thank you guys so much for giving me so much time this evening. Great information. I learned a ton of new stuff. It's a topic we'll come back to as an organization. We know it's the one parents have lost stress over, so we might bug you again someday to come on back and talk with us as we all get smarter about how to navigate this.